Lucky you.
Best 36 holes in golf.
You tuned in to Alternate Shots Podcast,
Marnie's Army,
where we talk about golf,
Barkeys, Sandy's,
poker,
Bond, James Bond.
horse racing,
I'm all in.
great movies.
Alfred Hitchcock.
We have no script.
And down the stretch they come.
We're glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Now assembled in the Kubala Winners Circle are members of the United
Let's start again.
States Naval
Billy,
Academy
we're back.
Club.
We're
under
back.
The direction
The
of
second
Monty
leg.
Maxwell
The
to
second
sing
leg of the Triple
Maryland,
Crown.
My
And
Maryland.
who but Secretariat has the record? Let's take a look at this.
Deadly Dream on the outside, a Coley Taj. Then it's also Torsion on the outside. They're coming by us. It's a Coley Taj getting it, and he's moving away by about 2.5 as they pass the stands. Settling into second, Torsion. Sham has good position, third on the rail. It's another 3 lengths back, Deadly Dream. Then our native and Secretariat is last again as they move into the first turn.
What do you think of that? The horse that's got the record is dead last in the first quarter of a mile or so. Billy, let's kick off the 2024 Preakness and have some fun today.
It should be a great race. The second jewel of the Triple Crown. Mystic Dan, having won the first, is going to try for the second one Saturday, and he's got a real good shot, to tell you the truth. He's going to have to beat a couple of Baffert speed balls. He's going to have to beat a Cox stretch runner. And he's going to have to beat a newcomer, relatively newcomer, Chad Brown horse, who's on the upswing. I would say Tucson Gold. It's going to be a much better race than I think people think. A lot of people are just handing it off to Muth. I challenge that a little bit. He could run away and hide, but his stablemate Imagination actually runs faster interior fractions than Muth.
Teaser. So let's get into that in a moment. But there's
Okay.
so many memorable moments here at the second leg of the Triple Crown, where they sing My Maryland. I think we just heard that opening, kind of like My Old Kentucky Home. They have My Maryland, My Maryland. They've got a lot of pomp and circumstance there. It's been going on for a long, long time. But you've got what?
Black-eyed Susans to everybody. Nice fruity little vodka drink that, puts everybody in the right mood.
But you go back to War Admiral, maybe one of the greatest thoroughbreds of all time, won this race, but had trouble, right? Didn't have the race, and I think this horse won by a nose.
And it's like golf. There's no pictures on the scorecard. Actually, in horse racing, there are pictures, but in the record books, there's no pictures. A win is a win, and at the cashier's window, they don't say you only won by a nose, so we're going to pay you less. So,
well,
a win is a win.
What do you remember about Seattle Slew and Secretariat and American Pharaoh and Citation? I know you weren't around with Citation, which is an older horse, but what do you remember the lore of these horses?
Well, Secretariat was like, I was still not into horse racing yet. But he was unavoidable. I think Sports Illustrated actually had him as the athlete of the year that year on the cover. He was just awesome. So whether you were into racing or not, you couldn't hide from the news about Secretariat. And then like 3 years later, along comes Seattle Slew, who ended up winning the Triple Crown. I think I made my largest bet in my life to that point on Seattle Slew, and I think he paid $3.20.
Right? Wasn't it 1977 about?
Yeah, 77.
Yeah.
And then Affirmed right behind him won a Triple Crown. So there was a shortage of Triple Crown winners, and along came Secretariat, and then 3 years later Slew, and the next year Affirmed. So we were starting to get used to it. The year after Affirmed, Spectacular Bid got the first 2 legs. Looked like he was going to win, but he got beat, upset by a horse named Coastal, I think trained by David Whiteley, if I remember, in the Belmont Stakes, the test of the champion, a mile and a half. This year, we're going to have a little bit of an asterisk, Triple Crown or no Triple Crown, because the Belmont Stakes, Belmont is closed for renovation, so they're going to run it up at Saratoga. and they're going to run it at 1.25 miles as opposed to 1.5 miles. And, those details actually matter a great deal because of the scope of the Triple Crown. The 1.5 miles, the third leg, it makes it more grueling, but they're going to be cutting that back to 1.25 miles. And the track makes a difference. Some horses love Saratoga, some don't.
What
So
makes
it's going to be
what makes
interesting.
more
But
of a difference, the track or the fact that it's a shorter race than 1.5 miles? What's a bigger difference to all these horses that'll be contenders?
the shorter race is a big difference. It's a big difference. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a really big difference, to tell you the truth. The track can make a difference to some horses and maybe no difference to other horses. But there are horses and trainers that love Saratoga, that have great success at Saratoga every year. There was a horse, I think, named 4-Star Dave, who won up there 4 or 5 years in a row. Theo Rito was a New York bred who won up there every year at Saratoga. So, there are horses for courses is an old saying. It applies to Saratoga as much as any track I've ever witnessed. So
Maybe your
it'll be
buddy
interesting.
Maybe your buddy Suge will come out of the woods and win that one. So you put the asterisks up there. So how about this for an asterisk segue? Same week of the Preakness, second leg of the Triple Crown, you have the PGA Championship, was kind of like the forgotten child in the major championship, but you can't be a Grand Slam winner without winning the PGA. And you got some horses in that. What are your horses in the PGA that's going to be in Louisville, Kentucky, ironically, this weekend?
Well, what's a little bit ironic about the golf world now is that the Live Tour is kind of like the Baffert. Baffert was banned from Kentucky for drugs. Pimlico hasn't banned him. Other places may or may not ban him. That's neither here nor there. But the Live players have been banned from most of the PGA event, the tour events, but they can come to the Grand Slam. So Baffert's got 2 runners in the Preakness, and the Live Tour probably has 4 or 5 entries in the PGA. It's going to be interesting to see how they stack up. It should be an interesting PGA, as well as again, there's some guys trying to take down the big monster Baffert in the Preakness, and there'll be guys trying to take down Scotty Scheffler if he makes it to the PGA. He might be a new father and skip it, but if he's there, he's going to be the front runner. And can John Rahm upset, or Cameron Smith, or any of the other guys, Brooks Koepka?
I think there's 3 great ones. If you think of the Baffert comparison, Baffert's horse is the 1-to-1 Muth, and the other one's 8-to-1. What's the other horse that Baffert's running called?
Imagination.
So you got, I think Imagination is Cameron Smith, and nobody would be surprised if he won another major. Shoot, he's the greatest putter in big time championships, nor would anybody be surprised if John Rahm. Maybe the surprise is Brooks Koepka this year, but what about Gooch?
He's
Triple
in.
asterisks.
He drew in from the also eligible. And you remember Rich Strike drew into the Kentucky Derby a couple years back and went off at 80-1 and won.
But did Rich Strike beg to get into the Derby? Gooch begged in every social media to get in. They finally said, okay, you're in. And what happens if he posts 78-78 this Thursday and Friday?
He will light up the board on Instagram and other social networks. Yeah.
Let's go back to the Preakness. But there is a kind of common, theme here in that I would say many people would call out the top 3 of the golf majors, and it wouldn't be the PGA Championship, whatever order it's going to be, the Open Championship, the Masters, or the Open.
The 2 Open Masters are always ahead of the PGA.
PGA in the top 2 or even top 3. And then the Preakness is kind of like the again, that child down the line you forgot about, and yet it's so important with these other horses that we talked about: War Admiral, Secretariat, American Pharaoh. You said a horse that had won 2 but it was supposed to win the 3rd, and Coastal came up out of nowhere. Could happen. Yep. But we're going to focus on the Preakness. Now let's get to the horses this year.
All right, the Pimlico has a reputation for favoring speed horses, but it's not automatic. And I was looking at this field, and there's a few speed horses in here. Just Steel will probably, trained by Wayne Lucas, will probably try and go early on the lead. The two Baffert horses look like they want to go early, but it would be kind of silly for Baffert to, run his two horses head to head at top speed and run each other out.
We've talked in the past in horse racing about one metric that, it's one metric in the way you handicap the buyer figures, which is showing speed. We do have a horse here that's not on this list. I forget which one it is.
Catching Freedom.
Catching Freedom was a 97 buyer figure, and I remember in some of my learnings from you and others that you got to be close to 100 buyer figure, they say, to win the Preakness. Now, last year the horse won was about a 96. So you see a bunch of horses here, Muth certainly in there, and Imagination. Talk about who you like in terms of handicapping, and if you want to bring in buyer figures, so be it.
Well, the buyer figures that's a handicapping tool and a speed rating tool that was developed by Andy Beyer, who was a notoriously good handicapper for decades. He's got books and books on it. But there is some subjectivity in it, based on the class of the horse and the class of the race. So, you tend to get a higher number if it's a harder race because you're running against better horses, theoretically. There's another number that comes with every race. It's called the track variant and the speed rating. And that, if it's in the 90, 100 being the track record. So if you see a horse with a 98 at 1.25 miles, then he ran 2/5 of a second off the track record. And then there's a track variant that could be anywhere from 0 to 40, which denotes the average time that day underneath the track record. So if it's 17, the average time of the winning races was 83 that day. Always adds up to 100. So the higher the track variant, the slower the track. So if you see a 96.22, that horse had a big run.
You prefer one of the metrics over the other?
I prefer that one over the buyer. I look at the buyers, and I'm not taking anything away from buyer, but again, there's some subjectivity in it. There's a lot of speed figures also calculated in it, but you could go on and on and on about speed, the same as you could about a pitcher in baseball. Today he doesn't feel good. He's, all the numbers go right out the window, or the horse's shoe is loose. There's so many variables that can throw the numbers off, but they're a good starting point to let you know who is supposed to be in the hunt here.
An average handicapper like me, and I'm giving myself more credit than I should, will just look at one line, the buyer numbers, and maybe the trainer and maybe the jockey, and make his decision, her decision on the horse he wants to pick, But just
Right.
like someone who's going to bet baseball, they're going to look at more than just the earn run average and the strike.
Yeah, they're going to look at how does he do against lefties? How does he perform on the road? How many pitches can he throw? Sometimes too much analytics. Like you look at, I think yesterday there was a game where was it the Reds were beating the Cardinals 4-0, and the pitcher was mowing them down through 6 innings. They took him out, and the next guy comes in. The next thing you know, St. Louis scores 10 runs and wins 10-4, 10-4, 10-5, or something like that. So the manager takes out a pitcher that's mowing them down. If you're sitting on the bench of the team, you're going, "Thank God I don't have to face that guy again. None of us could hit him." So,
when they take those guys out, what are you doing? The guy owns these batters. All right,
exactly. Turn your computer off, and that's the same thing with racing. Sometimes you have to turn the computer off. Right now, if you're going by buyers alone, Mystic Dan has 100 and 101 buyer. He went 189, 101 this last 3 races back. 100 last race, 89, 101. What's his name? Tucson Gold from Chad Brown. Buyer numbers are going up. They went from 65 to 84 to 95.
Oh.
And Chad Brown is a smart guy. And Chad Brown lost the Derby by an inch with Sierra Leone, and he's not running Sierra Leone against these Baffert horses. He's running Tucson Gold. And you might, if you didn't know better, think, what is he thinking? This guy's an idiot, but he's not an idiot. So
got from a 15 handicap to a 6 handicap to a +2 in the last 3 races. So this horse is on the move.
Yeah, he might be the now horse. He might get some attention. It'll be interesting to see his odds, especially since he can sit close enough to the pace that he won't be that far back. But He won't be on the lead either, I don't think. I think
Will some of those numbers be a result of changing a jockey or the track? Or could this all be 65 to 85 to 95, the same jockey, just on different tracks?
no, same jockey, and it could even be the same track. It's just like a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
They're walking, and the next thing you know, you turn around and they're going up the steps, and then you turn around and they're like running. So
And better
this is
training.
only this horse's fourth start. He could be developing every week. Again, like I always say, it's unknown, and even after the race, you think you know something, but you don't. The horse has a live look, as does Catching Freedom. Brad Cox is not an idiot either. So these guys know they're going against the giant, Bob Baffert. Bob Baffert seems to have his finger on every big race. He's got a horse for every big race. He's got 2 for this race. They really could go off the 2 choices. Muth seems to be the talk of the town, and he looks real good. But if you put him against Imagination, fractions to fractions in their last race, after 6 furlongs in a 1 1/8 race, Imagination would have been 7.5 lengths or 8 lengths ahead of Muth at that point. At the mile, he would have only been 3 lengths ahead, and at the finish, they probably would have been about even.
Are these both speed horses or closers, or what? How
They're
would you?
both speed horses, but it looks like Muth will probably not run with Imagination. That's my guess. I think Imagination is going to bolt out of there and try and steal this race wire to wire. I don't think Muth will run with him because they'll run each other into the ground. They both worked out together, the last 3 workouts in ridiculous times, 1:11 and 2 and 1:11 and 4 for 6 furlong workouts. That's race time. That's not workout time. That's like running a race.
Yeah.
So, and they ran together, and they ran right together. So I'm thinking Muth is going to sit off a little bit, and I'm thinking Catching Freedom and Tucson Gold will do the same thing. And Mystic Dan, you cannot write this horse off. He was a little bit of a surprise in the Derby, and he just lasted, but his numbers on reflection certainly put him in the mix of the Derby, and they certainly put him in the mix of this race. So leave him off at your own risk. I don't know that he's Triple Crown bound because it's such a hard thing to do, but again, there's an asterisk here.
Yeah.
Mystic Dan is very live.
Well, in the race that we saw at the beginning of the podcast, Secretariat was behind in that 1/4 mile spot. Do you see anybody that could be behind? If it's going to be somebody in the middle or behind, it's going to be Mystic Dan, right?
Or Catching Freedom or
Yeah.
Tucson Gold. I don't think any of the 3 of them are going to be way behind. I don't give a lot of chance to anybody who's way behind. Like Mugatu will be way behind. Uncle Heavy maybe trying to make up a lot of ground. A lot like Rich Strike. I think he's trained by the same guy as Rich Strike, right?
Yeah.
Uncle Henry.
Yeah, they're very, very interesting buyer figures. It would surprise you if those horses came out and won. So you've got a handful, just like the PGA Championship. Why don't you give me your thoughts on some possible exactas? Are you going to shy away from Youth, or because it's bad odds for your exacta, kind of looking to
Yeah.
balloons?
I mean, on first glance, and again, it's first glance, and anything can happen, but I can eliminate a handful of horses and pay attention to Catching Freedom, Muth, Mystic Dan, Tucson Golden Imagination. Those 5 horses, I think, are going to decide maybe the first 5 spots among them. I have respect for Chad Brown's ability. Bob Baffert, I don't know if it's his ability or whatever he does. He's been flagged for illegal use of drugs from time to time. So his record to me is, it is what it is. I don't want to get too far into that.
Spots, and he's in the race, and you can't ignore him.
You cannot ignore him. And he comes to win. So
You see a finish like the Derby where you had the nose, the flaring nostril finish.
yeah, it could easily be a finish because whichever Baffert horse stays on the lead, and I'm thinking it's going to be Imagination. If Imagination's going to win, he's going to be staggering home with the rest of these guys coming right on him. Did he build up a big enough lead? Did he save enough for the stretch is going to be the question. And Baffert's going to know the answer to that. And so will the jockey on Muth, because I'm sure they're all going to be talking to each other. Don't run each other into the ground. It would be crazy for them to have the 2 fastest horses in the race burn each other out. So I don't see that happening, but I can't see Imagination not going for the lead. So, and I think, what's his name? Just Steele might try to upset that speed also. So I figure Muth will sit in second or third place, try and save ground along the rail. I think Catching Freedom and Tucson Gold are going to sit mid-pack and try and make one run at the top of the stretch. Hopefully the speed will be faltering in front of them. And same with Mystic Dan, who might sneak up the rail again. Mystic Dan wasn't my pick when we started here, but the more and more I think about him and let it sink in, I'm not going to rule it. He's going to be in the middle of everything. I bet.
What position is Mystic Dan? What hole?
He's in the 5 post.
So he's not right up against the rail, sort of like he was in the Derby.
No.
Okay, so you outlined some of the exotic bets where you're going to bet who's going to finish first, second, third, fourth, and possibly fifth in this race. You said in that exotic bet, you'd certainly want to have whom? Which horses?
Imagination, depending on his odds, because I like odds. You know, my selections are going to be more based on possibility and odds than, you know, best horse. You know, because I think Muth is going to take most of the money.
Yeah, so you want Muth to finish sixth because you're going to put money on Muth.
I'm not gonna focus on him. I'll have him in the exotics and hope he finishes underneath in the superfectas or whatever. But I will use Tucson Gold and Catching Freedom in some exactas with Imagination and with Mystic Dan, and then just hope it's not Muth's day. Based on price, not based on ability. I think he's got the ability to take this thing, you know, wire to wire, even if he wants.
Yeah, and they've run in some good races. So Forever Young, the Japanese horse, was my horse for a $10 win, a $10 place, and a $10 show. Do you like a horse for a win place show bet like that in the Preakness 2024?
If I was going win place show, I'd go on Tucson Gold because I think you'll get a price on him, and I really figure he'll be in the money. I don't know if he's mature enough to beat these guys. Maybe he's getting this ready for the Belmont. I don't know what Chad Brown's plans are, but I know he's a very high percentage trainer, both grass and dirt. I don't think he enters these races for the fun of it. So he's got a plan, whether it's to win this race or to put some foundation under this horse for the Belmont. I don't know yet. He knows. I don't know.
So let's say Mr. Dan wins. He's got the 2 legs. He's going into the Belmont up in Saratoga with an asterisk. Go back in history, and if you were the owner of one of these other horses, whether it's Affirmed, War Admiral, Citation, Seattle Sleuth, Secretariat, and you won the Preakness, which one of those horses would you be so chest out with of those historic horses that you were so proud to be the owner of and you knew they were going to win the Belmont?
Well, I don't think you can count Secretariat. He's like the godfather in the movie world. You know, that's everybody's. You can't leave the Godfather out of the top 10 no matter what. So Secretariat's sort of in a class by himself, maybe like Augusta, or it's hard to say. There's just never been a horse, I don't think before or since, that rivals Secretariat. My personal favorite was Affirmed because I was new to the races and I caught him early and I had him in all his victories. I had him in all his losses as well. I loved that horse. I loved the way he went wire to wire. I'd stick my chest out for him anytime.
Well, he was the Tiger Woods against Phil Mickelson, right?
Yep.
How many times did Tiger Woods finish ahead of Phil in a major? Well, we've got a great weekend. We've got the Preakness. We've got the PGA. They're kind of thought they're important in the respective sports as it comes.
They're very similar in their positions in their particular sports. Yep.
Well, let's hope we have a great Preakness, and then on Sunday, assuming that the rain doesn't delay the PGA in Louisville, Kentucky. Let's hope that's a good one too. Billy, this has been great. A lot of fun. Thanks a lot.
Okay, man. Talk to you.
Why are you laughing?
Well, at least we have the laugh to add at the end. That's what happened. Somebody changed my grip, and the next thing you know, I can't do the podcast anymore. I felt like I was in the first row of the first pew at church right during the sermon.
And your brother was poking you.
My brother was making me laugh.